Welcome into the third episode of Fhs Season Tickets. I'm Michael.
And I'm Nick.
We are joined by an awesome guest onto the show, Barrett Sallee. Would you like to introduce yourself on to Fhs Season Tickets?
Yeah, Barrett Sallee, cover college football for Bleacher Report, for SEC from a text perspective, National College Football from a video perspective, and from a radio perspective on Sirius XM. So busy doing a whole bunch of things.
And I'm sure you guys know Barrett from Bleacher Report. He has made a bunch of articles, and Bleacher Report is a huge website, as you guys know.
Yeah, so now we're going to get into some of the questions for you, Barrett, just talking about college football. The first one, you were at the Georgia versus North Carolina game, and Nick Chubb looked absolutely fantastic from TV watching him. He looked like he was better than he was before his injury. Did you see anything that should worry Georgia Bulldog fans, or is he poised to have a great season?
No, he seemed fine to me. You know, I think the fact that he took 32 carries, and he didn't really seem like he was taking 32 carries, is really important because, I mean, this is a kid who, you know, from the moment that he became the every down back 2 years ago, it was clear that he could be a workhorse, and that was sort of against the grain for those Georgia teams because even, you know, Todd Gurley didn't do that. You know, he was hovering around 20 to 22 carries. Chubb brought a different dimension then, and to come back in the way he did it with, you know, basically taking control of the game, that to me tells me that he's back, and that takes a ton of pressure off Jacob Eason. And ultimately, I think that's the biggest reason why Jacob Eason's going to start this week against Nichols is because, you know, you saw that, you know, you have that buffer, and that was, you know, that to me signifies that Georgia can do exactly what it wants to do. And I think, you know, that coupled with the fact that they had a really good defensive performance, held North Carolina under 400 yards, which means an awful lot, is important because, you know, Kirby would say, you know, whether you asked him or he just volunteered the information all offseason, he didn't trust any of his defenders, or especially up front on the defensive line. And now he does. And so that coupled with Nick, I think makes Georgia a legitimate top 10 team at this point.
One thing I would like to ask Barrett, so you mentioned Todd Gurley, also Keith Marshall before. Is Georgia just, and Sony Michel did fine last season after Nick Chubb went out, is Georgia just a running back program? Like, is that system-based that Nick Chubb is succeeding so well? Or do they just recruit very well and and mature the running backs in the program?
No, I think they recruit real well. I mean, the fact that you had Gurley and Keith Marshall come in 2012, and you know, Keith Marshall really was a bigger prospect than Gurley.
Yeah.
Coming together, and then a couple years later, you have the 1-2 punch again with Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, and you know, have Chubb take over when Gurley got suspended. You know, that to me tells me that, you know, it's more about recruiting. I mean, it's obviously a system that, whether it was and still is a system that lends itself to running back success, but you know, they've recruited so well. And the thing about this, when Sony comes back, and then that should probably be in a couple of weeks. I doubt he plays this week against Nichols.
Yeah.
You know, Sony's not a change-up back. I think he gets kind of labeled as a change-up back because he's not as big as Nick Chubb. He's still a pretty thick dude, and so you know, he's not a workhorse like Chubb, but I mean, really nobody is. I mean, even Leonard Fournette is not a workhorse like Chubb because Leonard Fournette doesn't even get 30 carries consistently. So. Yeah, I mean, it's mostly recruiting into a system that lends itself to running back success.
So based off that system, and they're going to carry that on, you think Kirby Smart is basically a Mark Richt 2.0?
You know, I think he's more like Saban. I think he recognized while he was at Alabama that you have to have an offense that's a little bit more dynamic because even in good situations, even if you have elite defenses, you're going to give up 30, 40 points a game at times. Like, I think Kirby recognizes that, okay, well, we're still going to throw the football and do exactly what Alabama did, but they've got to be a little more creative, even more creative than Georgia was, you know, save for maybe Aaron Murray's last year. You know, I think he's going to run a lot of tempo when it's appropriate. Once he gets his quarterback's feet wet, I think he's going to run some spread-ish elements like Nick Saban does. Because I mean, if you watch, you know, Georgia under Murray and you watch Alabama under Kiffin, they mix in tempo when appropriate. They mix in spread elements, but still run power out of it. And that's ultimately why they're able to win basically any style of football game. And that's precisely why LSU can't, because they don't do those things.
For sure.
Yeah, and speaking into the LSU thing, you kind of led into my next question, and you published an article yesterday saying that LSU's offense is basically just stone-aged and they're getting passed by the rest of college football. How do you guys like Tom Herman or Art Briles coming into LSU change the program? You mentioned the spread out but still power running game, similar to what Art Briles did at Baylor. Do you think that LSU could implement that system with Art Briles or Tom Herman, and how would they impact LSU as contending for the SEC title?
See, I don't know if they have to go that drastic, that extreme, because, you know, if LSU starts lining up wide receivers outside the numbers, LSU fans are going to have a heart attack. That's pretty extreme. I think they could succeed, but I think they would probably be more likely to go the Lane Kiffin, Jim Chaney offense route, the pro style with, you know, the idea of, you know, running 4 receivers out there, creating mismatches pre-snap, and giving your quarterback plenty of different chances and different ways to be successful in a variety of different looks. Don't play a game in a phone booth at all times. You know, if they do go and look, I think Miles will get fired. I thought Miles would get fired, you know, during the season. I said that in January. He should have been fired in November. He's just too stubborn. But, you know, if they go in a different direction, they're going to want to get Herman, without a doubt. Knowing folks that know him really well, and in the limited times that I've talked to him over the last 6-7 months, I don't think he's leaving. I think if they get a Big 12 invitation, A, he's going to be pretty close to as highly compensated as Nick Saban, and B, he's really happy in Texas. So I don't know if he's going to go. And I know LSU folks and most folks say, well, LSU's a top 5 job. Okay, that's true. The difference between a top 5 job and a top 50 job right now is way different than it was 10 years ago. So I think Herman stays. Briles, I know folks have said he's going to be in, and I know the reason that they hired Jimmy Sexton to be his agent was to sort of bring him on this apology tour. I just can't see how a school would bring in Briles with the Pepper Hamilton report still sort of not being public, and you don't know what else is coming down the pike. Right now, he's a liability from a student safety standpoint,
for sure.
And I just cannot see how somebody does that.
Speaking on the LSU coaching job, what do you think? You mentioned Les Miles' stubbornness. Do you think there's any other factors, like maybe not being able to develop talent, like we see with Odell breaking out in the NFL? Do you think that he just cannot develop talent as well? He's getting all these 5-star recruits. Do you think the development of talent is his main problem, or stubbornness, as you said?
It's stubbornness. I mean, he can develop talent everywhere except quarterback. The problem with Les is that A, he's stubborn, and B, he's misguided. He has been infatuated with dual-threat quarterbacks for about a decade, really since Ryan Perrilloux. And the only pro-style guy he's had consistent success with is Zach Mettenberger, and Mettenberger, you know, had his personal issues and basically just fell into his lap. You know, he's not only stubborn, but he's misguided. He tries to recruit dual-threat quarterbacks, and with the idea of making them pro-style passers who use their second threat, their dual threat, as a reserve, as a fallback option. And those kids coming out of high school are not wired like that. None of them are. That is not how they play. They cannot get into the mindset of, I run a 4.440, but I can't run this 4.440 unless it's the last thing I do. Like that's not how quarterbacks are wired. None of them. Yes, yeah. So he's just is incredibly stubborn and incredibly misguided.
I'm going to ask you a question away from the SEC, but you still obviously cover college football. You like Notre Dame and Texas a lot. You had Texas going, I believe, 10-2, and Notre Dame in the college football playoff. You said in the early fourth quarter that you would put both of the teams in your top 10 in your Week 1 poll on Twitter. Do you think that some people in the media take the definition of winning and losing too seriously or not seriously enough? You look at a team like Tennessee, they played really bad against Appalachian State and got a win. Do you think that people in the media just take winning too literally or not enough?
I think it depends. I think early in the season, I think you move teams around way too much if they lose because, it's hard to watch Florida State and Ole Miss, Texas and Notre Dame, and not think those are two top 10, top 15 teams each. They were. And unfortunately, a lot of folks factor in winning and losing, I think, way too much and don't focus on how teams are built and how teams are, operating. I think Michigan should be a top 4 team right now, or 5 team. I think Ole Miss is a top 10 team. Notre Dame has a loss, and I put them 9th, I think, in my poll, because I think with Kaiser as the quarterback, they're not losing again. That's just not going to happen. That team is ultra talented, and whereas I think a lot of folks are too reluctant to air quote overreact to teams that surprise, but I think in certain instances you should overreact. I mean, I think the fact that Texas not only has a dynamic offense with defined roles for 2 quarterbacks, but the fact that
Lost him for a second.
Gilbert, go do your thing, that matters a lot because Charlie Strong's a defensive-minded coach, and that's not what he used to do. So that I think is something that I think voters are like, well, we can't overreact to week 1. We don't want to be the guys that overreact to week 1. Well, okay, I understand that, but you cannot label yourself as that. You have to properly react, and I think properly reacting to teams that do well that maybe weren't supposed to sometimes deserves an overreaction because it's the proper reaction.
Touching on your proper reaction, so are you saying that you think that Texas is just that good, or do you think that Notre Dame just really underperformed and is just not as good as it's going to be expected this year, or is it somewhere in the middle?
No, I think Texas is really good. I think Notre Dame's still really good. Notre Dame can still make the playoff if they win out. Texas, to me, is very good. I had them 10-2 preseason and had them losing to Notre Dame and Baylor. I don't even know if they'll lose to Baylor at this point because that offense, I think, was so great to watch. And defensively, they have a ton of players, and they gave up a ton of points. But sometimes you get in games like that. I think the fact that you have a ton of athletes who can play lockdown defense, but then you have an offense that can play shootout offense when games tilt in that direction. That's what football is now. It's not a game where if you have a lockdown defense, you're going to win a national championship every year. Otherwise, LSU would be national champions every year. You have to have the ability to win different styles of game. Texas didn't have that before because their offense was so horrific. Now they do, and that to me matters a lot.
So I'm a huge Notre Dame fan, and last year I saw a team in Texas that got gashed on defense. The defensive line was being pushed off the blocks, and Notre Dame was just really just overpowering them. And I come and watch the game this year, and it's just a whole different story on the defense. The defense looks ultra elite. Are these all young players? Are these all young players that are just balling out right now? I don't know because I'm not a Texas fan. Are these young talents that just got developed early and are just doing really well?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these kids have learned on the fly last year, and some older guys like a Dylan Haynes helped in the back end. Helps ease some of the younger defensive backs along. And a guy like Malik Jefferson, I mean, he came in last year as a freshman and played pretty well. He didn't have the consistency you'd like, but he was a freshman, and now that's the kind of guy you need in the middle of that defense to anchor down the defense. And they've got those players, and they've got the right coach, and they've got, I think, a coach that recognizes how important it is to be aggressive when you're supposed to be aggressive, but also let your leaders on that team lead the team. He doesn't have to coach those guys. The players coach themselves. And I think that's by virtue of younger guys, gaining and earning that trust like Malik Jefferson, and older guys who, may have been inconsistent throughout their entire careers, really still taking on that responsibility, even if they're not, part of the play every single down.
Yeah, and I've got a question for you. There were 4 quarterbacks who were all freshmen who looked fantastic in week 1. Jacob Eason of Georgia, Jalen Hurts of Alabama, Shane Buechele of Texas, and also DeAndre Francois of Florida State. If you could get 10% of any one of these players' career earnings in the NFL, which one would it be and why?
Jacob Eason, just because the NFL is stubborn and won't adapt to the other styles. Although Shane Buechele was really good, Jacob, I think, to me is going to have a pretty solid season this year, and then moving forward, he's the kind of guy who can thrive in the NFL. He's more agile than people give him credit for, and he's gained a ton of weight. I saw him in February or March, whenever it was. And he really was skinny. That's why his Twitter handle was Skinny QB10. And then standing next to him on Saturday during warm-ups, I'm like, holy crap, this dude is different. Like he looks like a different person. That's because when you get into college strength and conditioning, you lose the wrong weight, you gain the right weight, and that's a guy like Daylon Mack at Texas A&M, sort of the same thing. He's actually lost weight, but he's better because he put on the right weight. So, it's Jacob, I think, is set up for tons of success. But really, I mean, of the guys that played well on week one, the one who's going to have the best NFL career is probably Shea Patterson at Ole Miss, and he didn't play at all.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask one last question, and then Nick will do a couple quick takes. I've got my Vanderbilt jersey. I watched the game in Thursday night and discussed just horrible offense like it has been the past couple years. Taking out the quarterback in the second quarter after he leads touchdown drive really disappointed me. Have your thoughts changed on Vanderbilt? I know you had them going 6-6 and were defending them throughout the whole offseason. Do you think that Derek Mason really lost them this game and that was a major impact? And do you have them going any worse this year than you do before?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to trust Derek Mason at this point because, I mean, he finally names a starting quarterback, does it before media days on purpose so we can all talk about it, and starts him in the game. They get a 10-0 lead. He's 4 for 6, and then you start playing musical quarterbacks. It's like, dude, stop. Like, what? And not only Derek Mason, but like Gus Malzahn, his quarterbacks, Dabo Swinney not kicking a field goal, Tracy Clay's going for 2 of 7. It's like every coach needs a VP of common sense to say, swallow your pride, swallow your ego, and just win a darn football game. You don't have to prove that you're smarter than everybody here. That's stupid. And Derek Mason tried to do that, and I didn't think he'd do that, honestly. So hopefully he learned his lesson, but I'm not going to just trust that he learned his lesson because that's why I picked Vanderbilt to beat South Carolina, and that burned me. So, hopefully he did learn his lesson. If he did, they can spring an upset because the defense and the running game were fine. But man, it's coaches just, I get it. They're all type A. They're all egotistical. They all think that they're the smartest person in every single room, but they're really not. And the ones that realize that, Charlie Strong on Sunday, have success. The ones that don't do what Derek Mason did.
Yeah, I love your common sense thing for every college football team. I heard you say that on the Cube show. I was listening to that when you went on the Cube show. It makes a lot of sense what you say, but Nick, would you like to give him some quick hits before Barrett goes away?
Yeah, now we're going to go into a segment of quick takes. This is mainly just yes or no questions. Maybe you can add a couple of comments in. First, we're going to start off. Is Jalen Hurts legit? Can he lead this Alabama team to the playoffs in a national championship?
Yeah, he can. He's got the offensive coordinator to do it. The one thing I would say let's pump the brakes a little bit is what is he going to do when he faces adversity? And I'm not talking like first play fumble adversity, but what I'm talking about is DeAndre Francois down 3 scores against a good team adversity. Because, DeAndre Francois at Florida State obviously came of age in front of us. I don't know what Jalen Hurts is going to do in those situations, and they will pop up. So he can, except, let's pump the brakes on making him a superstar yet, because other quarterbacks, young quarterbacks like a Francois, I'd say had more important week ones.
Okay, yeah. Does Les Miles get fired mid-season?
Oh, I said yes in January. I'm going to say yes, because if you look at their schedule, I think they lose to Auburn. I think they lose to Florida. They lose to Ole Miss. So you're talking about 4 losses before the bye week before Alabama. Yeah, he won't get fired before Alabama. But if If they have 4 losses prior to Alabama and they lose to Alabama, yeah, peace out.
LSU fans will not be happy. All right, and is anyone going to touch Alabama this season? Are they untouchable barring injury?
No, they're very touchable. They're very. I mean, that's still a team that, again, everything went right for them against USC, and that's great for them. But there's going to be times that doesn't happen. There's going to be times where your wide receivers let you down. There's going to be times where your quarterback lets you down. There's going to be times where your defense lets you down. We don't know what those players do in that instance, in those situations, because they will pop up. I think while Alabama was the talk of the town because of what they did, more important thing, like Georgia getting tested by North Carolina told me more about Georgia. Games in which teams were, faced adversity and fought through it, those matter more than blowouts. It's great that they blew USC out, but with so many new pieces, I want to see what happens when things don't go their way, how those new pieces and those new players react. So they're not untouchable. I mean, they're going to face adversity.
And one of the last ones here, I kind of am always not too hot on Oklahoma, but is Oklahoma done for the playoffs this year already, week 1?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have them in this year. I had Texas out of the Big 10 or Big 12. I don't think they beat Ohio State, which obviously is probably an elimination game for them for the playoff. And then after that, I mean, I don't think they beat Texas. They certainly. The thing about Oklahoma is they sort of got built into this sort of behemoth, this unbeatable behemoth, just because they went to the playoff last year, and that was unfair to them because that's not reality. They got some ridiculous opposing quarterback luck last November. They got some luck just early in the season by losing to Texas. They still found a way to back their schedules backloaded, and they had a chance for everybody else around them to sort of fall into place. So they're really good. I cannot buy them as a legit Big 12 contender.
And lastly, I just got to sneak this in because, again, I'm a huge Notre Dame fan. You kind of touched on this already. What is going to be the path to the playoffs for Notre Dame, and do you think it's possible, and what do you think they're going to have to do to get it done?
I mean, they have to win out. If they win out, easily. We'll see how that looks. I would imagine if they win out, it's going to be hard to keep a one-loss Notre Dame out, that lost season opener. That does sort of depend on Texas, because if Texas is sneaking at the end of the Big 12 season with one loss and is looking like it's a possibility for that 4th seed, which I think is a legit possibility, that could be Notre Dame's worst nightmare. So, I think the natural logic is to say, well, you have to be the biggest Texas fans now. I think you have to be the biggest Texas opponents now, because you do not want them blocking you.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting take. Like, Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech in week 2, the year that they did win the national title, and Virginia Tech ended up being terrible and probably helped out Ohio State. But thanks so much for coming on to the show. It was a pleasure having you. And
yeah, thank you. I'm really excited for what you say about Texas too. I never thought of them as being a huge program. Once again, that's really going to get college football going. I love when Texas and Notre Dame are doing really good. I feel like it's really good for college football.
Yeah, it is. Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yep,
no problem.
Thanks.